Thank you for staying with us. What are your expectations of this government, the federal government? What are your expectations of your state governments? A host of them have already come up with their cabinets. Commissioners have been announced. Some of them have sworn them in. Some already have their kitchen cabinets, what you call those in the office of the governor and office of the president and office of the Senate president, whichever one, it is for you. There are high expectations of the federal government, and there is no way the federal government will be able to do anything significantly without ministers, which, of course, according to the constitution of the country, is a requirement. So, in a shorter list than usual, perhaps the first tranche, as the chief of staff has said, President Bola Tinubu unveiled a list of his ministerial nominees just 2 days before deadline. Of course, the names of the 28 nominees were sent to the Senate for approval. That's 2 days ago. And they include former governors, economists, health experts, lawyers, and so many others like that. Of course, before that list came, a host of people have been setting all kinds of agenda for the ministerial nominees, different professional and trade union associations, saying that the federal executive councils have to be comprised of people with competence to drive national development speedier than usual, because Nigerians have been waiting for a long time. The NBA was part of those organizations who said the president and his ministers must improve the security situation in the country. Labor unions, of course, the trade union Congress on its part advised incoming ministers, particularly incoming ministers of labor, finance and budget planning, to ensure industrial harmony and all of that. Smeden's national vice president also outlined infrastructural deficiency, capacity building, funding, and so many other things. But what are your own expectations? This morning we have with us two people, but one of them is with us right now. Dr. Aliyu Modibo is a former minister in the Federal Capital Territory. He joins us from our studio in Abuja. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Doc. Well, you've been in government. Yes, sir. You've been in government before, particularly as as a minister. So let's begin from there. First of all, it's early days. It's just 28 ministers have been selected as at now. Nominees sent to the Senate. What are Nigerians to expect? Hitherto, what we hear is that some people just go into the Senate chambers, they bow and go. Do you think the same thing is going to happen this time around? Although we've heard the Senate say it's not going to be business as usual, there's going to be a lot of grilling and all. What are your own expectations of the screening process, as Nigerians expect them to get, as the president often said, hit the ground running?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Good morning. The process of the screening actually is already enshrined into the rules and regulations of the Senate. So that cannot be contested. There are some people that will be expected to take a bow and go. Some people will be asked to clarify one or two things on their background and their experience. So that process will go. But the most important things that Nigerians need to reflect on, and including the ministers that are coming on board, is the reasons for success or failure of a minister. You know, and I have thought about this since you called me last night, and I thought I share with you some of my thoughts on that, and then that will now properly straight the agenda that the government is setting for the coming ministers and their subordinates or people who will work with them. I believe that a minister will succeed or fail based on the clarity of mission of Mr. President himself. the clarity of mission and vision. So if your president is very clear about his objectives of governance, and you have to toe the line and he stipulates that to you, then it is something that will of course, occupy your time and during your tenure. The other thing is that will even help the president himself, while ushering in a new government and then setting the agenda, is the staffing, of proper staffing within the presidency itself. As we have seen in the past, there are dislocations here and there. You have to have a proper functioning office of the secretary to the government, and then, of course, then the immediate villa headed by the chief of staff. Now, people have to understand, these offices may sound, grandeur, but actually, in a very simple term, the secretary to the government is the secretary of the government, Then the chief of staff is the secretary of the president, So he has to, or they have to organize the president in a way that he will deliver on his mandate. Then you have the competency and, like you mentioned, of the ministers themselves. Are they ready for the job? Are they fitted in well to the portfolio they are given in? Are they enthusiastic about the job? Because you can come in as a novice, but if you are a fast learner and you are really enthusiastic about the job, you will learn quickly. You just, hit the ground running. But if you are already, ill-prepared, you are just there for the lure of the office, then you miss the point. Because all we have now in government is really hard work that we need to turn things around quickly for our people, particularly on the economy, infrastructural, intervention, and security, like you said, so there are so many, but it depends on the portfolio a minister is given, and how he approaches that work. And then, of course, another challenge that the minister will face that will either make him succeed or fail is the civil service. As you can see, most of the people that are normally nominated to serve as ministers have never had public or civil service experience. And it's different from being a public servant before, but proper civil service procedure, because once you go in there as a minister, the first thing you are confronted with is your permanent secretary, who will tell you that he's the accounting officer, and you are just the administrative head. And so there are a bunch of contradictions, because then you are the administrative head, he is the accounting officer, or she is the accounting officer. But I advise that, ministers immediately, please sit down with your permanent secretary, know what is in the books. Because some people even go in there and until the time they leave as ministers, they don't even know the proper accounting or the balance sheet of the ministry. So then now they are hoodwinked, and you don't know, you just, because there's this thing that we have hopefully during this administration will tackle, is the template of running ministries is too old. From colonial times to date, it has changed, and so the budgeting process is the same line board all the time, so people need to go in with radical ideas. And then, of course, the other impediments is, of course, the other MDAs that will be a stumbling block towards your progress, particularly the Ministry of Finance, the Office of the Accountant General, and then the Central Bank of Nigeria. As a minister, you are allocated, your budget, but then on paper you have, X amount of naira to spend on projects or to make payments on outstanding liabilities that you have inherited. But you go in there and the Ministry of Finance will not release the money to you. Or the Accountant General will not give you the AIE, what they call, the release. Or the Central Bank will say there's no money. So that is why really over time, we have experienced underperformance of the budget, You know, so by the time, you know, the end of the fiscal year comes, you hear people have not spent up to 25% or 10% of their budget. You know, the 80% has to go back. But actually, is not the money has not been released. You know, so that is the major challenge for our incoming ministers. Then, of course, you have another recurring decimal, which is the relationship with the National Assembly. You know, from my experience when I was minister, one of the little distractions, you know, the ministers want to cooperate fully with the National Assembly, particularly, you know, if you are lucky to have a chairman that is very knowledgeable, very understanding, very, you know, helpful, you know, you work smoothly. But in some cases, you know, some of the members of the National Assembly can be very overbearing, you know, calling you all the time to come for hearings, you know. So in a week, you spend like maybe 2-3 days in the National Assembly answering one query or another, and then the oversight functions, you know. So these are all things that our incoming ministers have to have at the back of their mind. Immediately you go in, familiarize yourself with who is your chairman, you know, the House Committee and the Senate Committee, and then try to cultivate a very good relationship so that you can have smooth working relationship with the Assembly. Then, of course, you know, a lot of people know this is a major distraction for a lot of ministers, which is the constituency demands. You know, people expect you to employ everybody from your village, you know, or to tar the road in your hometown. You know, when I was FCT minister, up till today, there are people who accuse me that I have not did a single project in my village, in my hometown. And I said, what do you mean? I should take the money from the Federal Capital Territory to my village or my state? You know, but them ministers do it, and it's wrong. You know, just in the name of politics, you know, they want to be politically correct. They want to please their constituencies, you know. And then, of course, you have family and friends also who are seeing you as a gateway to being rich, you know, and they overburden you, you know, with a lot of demands. Give me contract, you know, if you are a minister of FCT, give me land, you know, do this, do that, you know. So ministers have to be very careful of that, you know. Not that you cannot help people, but do it within limits and within, you know, giving what the law stipulates. Then we also have missed the road a long time ago where we don't have monitoring and evaluation of ministers, of performance of heads of MDAs, you know. So there needs to reintroduce that, you know, peer review. You know, ministers should be critical of themselves, you know, or even bring some older ministers like us and say, okay, take a look at this, what is going wrong, you know. And of course, you advise based on your institutional memory and say, okay, we tried this before, 10 years ago or 30 years ago or 5 years ago, it didn't work, you know, so don't go that route. But, you know, these days, nobody will even ask you. The resources are available to our officials is so enormous in this country, but we underutilize it. You know, people are just sitting there, retired permanent secretaries, retired academics, retired ministers, you know, and they have a lot to offer to give you benefit of their experience, but nobody will ask. Now, some people do even karambani like me. Once in a while, you know, I just would pick a phone and call. And say, okay, don't do it this way. We have done it. Oh, great, you are doing well. You know, but a lot of times, you know, once you do it once, twice, the next time you call, they will not pick your call. You know, so please avail yourself, particularly to people that already were there before you.
But Dr. Modibo,
you know, there's nothing, you know, you can do.
It sounds to me that, I mean, if the incoming ministers were to go for an orientation. You've already given them the orientation from what we have heard so far, and a good number of people are most certainly educated by what you have said so far. And it's really interesting that you mentioned a number of things, because I was taking some notes. But speak to this in just 60 seconds. How significant is it for you? Yeah, quite a number of things that I've taken from what you've said that I would like you to clarify, but speak to this one for a moment. How significant is it for you that in most cases the presidents don't attach the portfolios of the incoming ministers to the list when they send it to the Senate. There are those who are wondering, maybe that would have assisted the Senate to ask the appropriate questions in their screening process.
Well, you know, the reality is that, to be honest with you, in our country, that to me is insignificant, you know, because whether the portfolio is attached, by the time the portfolio is attached, then there are other procedures in the National Assembly which are a little bit cumbersome, because then you have to go to the committee, you know, that is overseeing that mandate. So, and then the committee can be polarized, can, you know, take time, you know, and then the process will be prolonged. Okay. And I think that is why, you know, since 1999, portfolios are not attached. Actually, when you go back up to 1979, you know, during the Shagari administration, no portfolio is attached, because then the president is allowed the discretion to and his colleagues or the committee, you know, to evaluate and see really this person we are sending to this place, you know, is competent enough to do it, you know, and then they give you. But by the time you send the portfolio, believe me, to the National Assembly, what Nigerians will see will be very rowdy in some cases, you know. So I like the process now, you know, and the various agencies have done their checks and balances on the ministerial candidates, okay, and that, you know, should be trusted. But like I said, you know, the most important thing for a minister to succeed, actually, of all the things that I've said, two are the most important. You know, first of all, the clarity of the president's mission. You know, if the president is very clear, and also you have access to the president, because in the past, you know, there are, even recent past, you know, where ministers will tell you that they have not seen Mr. President for X number of days, you know, and they want to see Mr. President. Or Mr. President will come, you know, and say, go to my chief of staff. Now, ministers, you know, and that is never heard of really, you know, because the minister is your proxy. Yeah. Is the proxy of the president, you know, particularly based on our constitution, the president is the chief executive of the nation. Okay. So once you are given a portfolio, actually it is his portfolio. Exactly. It is his job. You are just there as his agent.
One of those,
you know, so things, you should have access to see your president.
Yeah. One of the things that you said that I find very, very important is when you mentioned ministries, departments, and agencies that the minister has to work with. I had a conversation in the course of this week with a friend who had talked about the Ministry of Agriculture, for instance, Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, and I was saying, look, there are at least 11 parastatals or departments and agencies under that ministry, the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, but it seems that some of them work in silos. And that struck me quite significantly. Some of them are set up by separate laws. For instance, under the Ministry of Trade, Investment, Trade and Industry is the Companies and Allied, CAC, that's CAC, CAMA 2020, I think, that set up that particular, you know, organization now. So it has a law that set it up, even though it is supervised by a particular ministry. Consequently, that minister has to work in line with that, and that's one of several under that ministry. So how do we facilitate that kind of partnership? Because, yes, as you said, the president has proxies in the ministers, but the ministers themselves have to, as you said, line up their own agenda with the president's agenda. Okay, this is the job that the president has given me. He's given me what to do. Now I have to determine how to do it with the instruments of state. Exactly. What are the challenges? I mean, you've talked about the challenges you know, of working with the MDS. What are the specific challenges, if you don't mind saying, that the ministry, a minister has to work with? The Minister of Transport, for instance, had a tough time working, well, it would seem, with the Nigerian Ports Authority at the time, because there are always all kinds of bottlenecks You know, that people find it difficult getting things out of the ports because of one reason or the other. What are some of these challenges that the ministers need to understand in terms of working with the ministries, departments, and agencies who are going to bring the good governance that the president promised?
Thank you very much. Incidentally, you know, I was a Minister of State for Power and Steel about 20 years ago. That was my first ministerial outing, 2002 to 2003. Then I also had the good fortune of becoming Minister of Commerce and Industry in 2006 to 2007, then eventually also Minister of the Federal Capital Territory. So I had the spectrum of 3 times being a minister. Now, you mentioned particularly the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, then now Trade and Investment. Yes, there are parastatals there, and the way I dealt with it was that even though, you know, you are paired into 2, Minister and Minister of State, you know, then you are giving, this schedule is splitted into 2 as well. You know, the main minister will take, you know, some of the MD, you know, the departments and agencies, and the other minister will also take, you know. But then if you are so lucky to be in sync, like I was in 2006 with my Minister of State, who was incidentally much older than myself and more, I was even a governor before. But we work very well together, Fidelis Tabgun, you know, and so we were always together comparing notes, you know, and then, but I can still tell you, it is a really enormous challenge, you know, for the minister to spread himself so thin, you know. Sometimes some of these agencies may not even get your full attention, you know, until the end of your tenure. Now, something revolutionary happened during the Buhari administration, the 2015 to 2019 and to 2023. 80% of the ministers had full 2 terms. It has never happened before in our country, where a minister will spend complete 1 term in office without being changed, you know, and then now had also the good fortune of having another 4 more years. So that was very unprecedented, and that is why, you know, for some of us were really shocked that the sectors, you know, instead of, you know, booming, because, you know, the President Buhari gave them that stability, you know, instead there's a lot of, you know, disappointments in some of these quarters. Some ministers have done well, of course, you know, but, and that is because of the supervision is so I don't know, you know, no matter how agile you are, you know, as a minister with all this flurry of activities of the MDAs, that is why I'm an advocate that, you know, one thing that President Bola Tinubu should do for us is to really look at the ministries critically and restructure them, you know, and to see, you know, to streamline the MDAs, you know, the departments. I've read the Oronsanye report, you know, get another committee quickly to look at the Oronsanye report and then streamline all these too many agencies that are almost doing the same thing, consuming the same amount, you know, in the budget, you know, that can be done by one single entity, perhaps, and that can be supervised easily. Because, like I said, the minister is the supervisor, you know, and then now, of course, I mentioned to you the civil service. You know, one area that we really, you know, have been very lucky in this country since independence or even before independence is the pride we have in our civil service. But over the years, the service has declined drastically. You know, the performance and the competence of the permanent secretaries, because a lot of magu-magu has gone through in the way, you know, permanent secretaries are appointed, you know, or promoted, you know, so then we have lost the quality, you know, no matter what, we should not try and politicize the civil service. You know, the civil service must be sacrosanct, to be honest with you, because they are the bastion of stability of our entity.
So how do we go about that stability? My apologies, Dr. Modibo. How do we go about that stability? It's a very, very concerning one. A number of people would, you know, they've begun to give a completely different interpretation to civil service by you removing the CI in front and putting another letter altogether. So how do we go about that? Because there are those who even say that if you want to take care of corruption, it's going to happen within the civil service or from the level of the civil service. In fact, there are those who say part of the challenges of a minister is that the minister is confronted by, the accounting officer, as you said, the permanent secretary, and some people will come and tell him, look, this is the way we do this one, this is the way we do this one, and all of those. So what are the things that go on in the civil service, especially at the federal level, that need to be dealt with? I ask that advisedly. The civil service is not only within the secretariat. They are spread all over the country. The federal agencies are in virtually all 36 states of the country, and the minister is the supervising minister. And the number of people are going to be saying, if it's not working in Kebbi, in one local government in Kebbi, not working in one local government in Maiduguri, not working in one local government in Sokoto, they're going to mention the minister. So how do we deal with that? How does a minister deal with that kind of challenge?
Well, it's by, first of all, being proactive. Like I said, first of all, the moment you hit the ground running in your ministry, understand your permanent secretary. If possible, if you are not comfortable, request for a change. I did that twice when I was the main minister. Of course, when I was in power still, it was very short tenure. And I was a junior minister. But when I came to Ministry of Commerce and Industry, I went and spoke to the head of service and said that, please, can you deploy for me this person, and because I worked with him before, and maybe for me I had the advantage of also, working in the service. So I am not coming fresh. So by virtue of working in the presidential villa for up to about 10 years, I've mingled with all the civil servants, and I've observed their competence and their excellence. So the same thing when I went to FCT, I also requested for my permanent secretary. And so ministers should not hesitate to request if they see that there is going to be a conflict. Then the other permanent secretary will be posted somewhere. Then now the other thing also is to be proactive. Now, the permanent secretary will not allow you to interact with the directors or the assistant directors or the deputy directors. I believe, one area of success is for you to have direct access to the other staff and make that clear to your permanent secretary that your style is you can call a director directly to your office, but otherwise, the permanent secretaries will frown at that, and the subordinates will be very scared to come to you or to meet you. What I used to do when the first time I was minister in 2002, I will just leave my office and go around the ministry and enter into an office, and then now, I meet the level 14 officer or 13 officer, and then, you have already started to cultivate trust. And so you will get information, you will get, and everybody will be on his toes, But if you sit there, you are a big man, a big minister, and everybody else is small, then you will not get it, And then now, like you said, the civil service, like I said, we cannot overemphasize this importance of rejuvenating the civil service. And this is the golden opportunity for us to do it with BAT, President Bola Tinubu. Hopefully he will also look at the civil service, put it back on track, see all the, like you said, how can we make the civil service better? Recruitment and promotion has to be very clear. The recruitment process, and remuneration. We must, find a way to pay our civil servants, very competitive, package, just like they would have gotten in the private sector.
Okay.
So then now you attract the first-class minds and brains.
Okay.
And then also have tools to work with.
Okay.
But right now, when you go into our service, I'm pretty sure you have experienced this, into the ministries, you find even archiving, even, filing system is so archaic, it's so old. You know, these days of computers, you know, and still you carry files along the corridor and all, you know, tattered papers and so appalling, you know. So you know, it's just that we need to do things differently,
But
quickly.
how
Because to
about
be
this
honest with you,
one other leg, Dr. Modibo? How about feedback, both from the ministries, departments, and the agencies spread across board? How about feedback from them, the field officers spread all over the place? How about feedback or communication with Nigerians? Most of the time, that doesn't happen. And for me, I believe that if we're going to deal with the challenge of trust, we're going to have to do it through communication. Otherwise, we may not be able to gain the trust of the people. So when people, most of the time, ministries, departments, and agencies don't come out to respond to Nigerians when they raise an issue, how do you think that can be resolved? Because a good number of times, civil servants who have the responsibility of engaging, for instance, on social media, will say that unless they get the approval of the permanent secretary or some director somewhere, they can't tweet, or they can't even send out some of these messages on the social platforms where a good number of Nigerians are.
Yes, that can be taken care of by if people in public service who are now, you know, say like ministers, public servants and heads of MDAs, then on the other hand, you have civil servants. And the key word here for all of us to understand is the word servant. You know, if the people who, or the forebearers that created this system didn't call us public kings or public, you know, lords or public this. They said servants. So you are there to serve the public. And if you believe you are there to feel pompous, you are above others, you know, when people come in, the regular citizen comes into your ministry and you're shouting and you're shunning them and you have disdain for them and you don't want to listen to, you know, complaints, then you are not performing that task of being a public servant or a civil servant, you know, so, and you have no business being there. You know, no matter how mundane, how irritating, you know, the citizen is, since you have taken upon yourself that that is the line you want to take in your career, then you must tolerate, you know, to the point of really giving the service. You go to a hospital and you see a nurse shouting at a patient, you know, a poor woman in the labor room, you know, trying to deliver a baby and with all the pain, and then shouting at her, or somebody has come and, you know, in great pain and, you know, nobody is attending to them. So these are all things that we really need to reorient ourselves. Okay. You know, and that is why when you take Nigeria as a business enterprise, and that is why we are losing, because if it were a private enterprise, and you have all this attitude, of course you lose money.
Absolutely.
You know, and so now the deficit that we have, Nigeria as an enterprise, is because we are not giving service
to the people. Permit me, Dr. Modibo, to engage another guest very quickly, Professor Vincent Anibogun. He is the Director General, International Institute for National Transformation. He has been stuck in traffic on his way to our studio, but let's see how much of him we can take. Good morning, Prof.
Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me. Well, as you can see, I'm still in the car heading to your office.
Well, sincere apologies about that. We're just hoping that things get better on that route. Well, let me believe that you've listened to a bit of the things that we are talking about in terms of setting an agenda for incoming ministers. Dr. Modibo has been taking us, being a former minister 3 times in the country, is giving us quite, you know, the background and the updates on what needs to be done. But professional and trade unions have been setting agenda for the ministers that are going to form the cabinet. So for you, what should be the priority in terms of deliverables to the people?
In fact, Nigeria for a long time has been managing poverty. I think this is the season for the lion to roar. This is the season for us to move into an era of industrial revolution. So we need leaders that are entrepreneurial and entrepreneurial in their thinking. Leaders that can really lead this nation out of our history. We need radical thinkers. We need people that will venture into new areas. There's so much unexplored potential of this nation. We don't need to continue to recycle the same mentality, the same approach to doing business. I think it's time for Nigeria to arise and move into a full-scale industrial age. What does that mean? It means we need to rethink. We need to think outside the box. We need to think ways to release our people, the youth, to train them. We need to address insecurity. We need to address food security. Those things cannot be addressed without us seriously looking into industrialization. That's what I think the thrust of this set of leaders that are coming in. That's what I think they should focus on.
Well, Prof,
not
just a quick
bureaucracy,
one.
not on the old ways of doing
Pardon me,
things.
Prof, if you can hear me. You know, this is where we always find ourselves every time new ministers come into office. We want them to do this, we want them to do that. But it would seem like we just want those ministers to do it, and when they're done, they should just pack their stuff and go. How about a long-term kind of thinking, such that no matter what minister comes in, no matter what president or commissioner comes into office, they follow a particular program? The number of people have considered that maybe that is one approach that we should look at, but how do you see us going about that? It would seem like we're just, how do I put this now, drifting along just needs, a daily bread, so to speak. How about a long-term thinking of
the first thing to do, critical issues in every...
Go ahead, please. Hello, Prof. Please go ahead.
The first thing is to look at all the critical issues in every sector, critical in the sense on how they affect the nation and how they affect the people. For example, food security should be tops in our agenda in this season. And then develop a long-term plan, short-term, mid-term, and long-term, how to address them. And develop a clear document that will guide whether the current leadership or the future leadership, anyone that takes that portfolio should continue from where the previous leader stopped. This idea of people coming in and, just doing what they like, it does not work. So I totally agree with you that it's time we develop short-term, mid-term, and long-term plans for these various sectors. So when people come in, there's continuity. I totally agree with you.
Well, Prof, just a quick one. Do you think Nigerians are in too much of a hurry? Things have gotten, from what the president was saying yesterday when he was speaking with some youths, Nigeria's challenges date back more than 40 years. But it, as Dr. Modibo also said earlier, things have only gotten worse over time. Do you think Nigerians are in too much of a hurry to get so much within so little time? Or you think it is something that can be done? Because if things don't go as speedily as Nigerians want, it's only natural for them to say that the government is not performing, whether at the state or federal level.
I don't think so. I think Nigerians are very patient people, but they are impatient with leadership that has not produced. Consistently, we promise them, and then after 8 years, things are worse, not better. Of course, that creates impatience. But if we can show them and that after 4 years there is progress, by the way, Singapore went through the same story. They were impatient with Lee Kuan Yew when he was unveiling his policies. But once they saw results, once they saw that every term there was significant achievement, of course, they trusted the leadership and allowed him to rule them for over 30 years, not by coercion, but by influence.
Okay.
So Nigerian government, it's about time they start showing positive results in the lives of our people, in our society. Okay. That will earn their respect, the respect of the people, and people will follow them willingly. Okay. But when we promise and we don't deliver, we create a more impatient society.
Okay. Dr. Modibo, perhaps this some kind of response from you on that in particular, when he was speaking about, the ministers collaborating and all of those things. What are the impediments to collaboration between different ministries? For instance, the president said when he declared food security emergency, he said the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development must collaborate with the Ministry of Water Resources. We also know that for the Ministry of Transport to do quite well, it needs to work with the Ministry of Works, particularly. So what are the impediments to the ministries working on that? Just a quick one on that. Another example, in the security sector, there are those who have complained about lack of collaboration between the different security agencies. What are the impediments to collaboration between the ministries, departments, and agencies who have to work together in order to deliver good governance to the people? And how can we, get around them?
Okay, thank you very much. I think the whole gamut is that the fundamental thing for ministers to understand is they are all set up to work together, because the government is one, and the president is one, so that up in issue has to be understood. Now, secondly, you say, if I can respond to some of the impediments, some ministries is in the area of funding. Now, if, for instance, water resources, or let me take commerce and industry where I had experience with agriculture. We in commerce and industry, we are the marketers, of the products that come out of agriculture. Or we are the, manufacturers of some of the things that come out of agriculture. So when the cassava policy was introduced by President Obasanjo, we were collaborating with the Ministry of Agriculture. They were giving the bulk of the money because they are the ones that will deal with the farmers, with the, things and that. But we in commerce and industry didn't have anything to work with. And I recall, the president directed both of us to sit down together and that the Minister of Agri should give me something to put a marketing strategy for our cassava. Because that time we were thinking of, cassava should be used. Since we have advantage in cassava in this country. It can grow anywhere in all of Nigeria. So we are going to do cassava bread, we take, even this gari. I remember President Obasanjo directed me to go to even neighboring countries and teach them how to eat gari, in Niger, in Mali, in Burkina, where there is no, so that at least we can have a robust market for our cassava. But sometimes the impediments is the money for you to work with. There are some ministries that, would be dependent. Then now, if you are not lucky, you have a pompous colleague. He looks at you as, you are leeching on him or on his budget, and then that creates a small friction. And our ego, everybody feels there he's a minister. So, so then ego comes in. But sometimes I believe that I am hoping that this new set that will come will put ego aside, will look at the country at first. You have said something, said Nigerians, do we have time to wait, to keep waiting for all this, progress to come? No, I think we are running out of time. People are getting more and more impatient by the
Absolutely.
day. Because now we live in a global world that is moving so fast.
Absolutely.
And so when you are in Nigeria, you are traveling around the world and things are just being done very effortlessly. And our young people too are different these days.
Absolutely.
These young people are very smart.
Absolutely. And they form
extremely intelligent.
They form quite the population. Well,
exactly.
There's so much. Yes, there's so much to discuss, Dr. Modibo. But we're gonna have to bring you back some other time because I mean, you've.
Thank you.
By the way, someone sent in a mail to commend what you said. Let me read the mail. It says, I want to commend Dr. Aliyu Modibo for the very crucial and critical points he has made for new ministers. If they follow what he has said, they will succeed. That's from Bayo Ojo. Well, I guess that is for you. Well, Prof, let's take your last comments now on this. I mean, you have 30 seconds, your last words on the agenda for incoming ministers, Prof.
Yes, I believe that this is a unique opportunity for Nigeria to put her mark in the development of Africa. So I'm praying that the incoming ministers, first of all, will be disciplined people who can execute well thought out and disciplined thoughts, and of course, choose the right people and put them in the right place to execute those programs. If we do those three things, they themselves being disciplined, choosing disciplined people to work with them, and developing programs that will address critical issues in every sector. If they will do that, we will indeed see a great result in their era.
Professor Vincent Anebogu, DG, International Institute for National Transformation, thank you so much for your time this morning. And sincere apologies that you were unable to make it to the studio due to traffic. We also thank you, Dr. Aliyu Modibo, former Minister, Federal Capital Territory, former Minister in the Ministry of Power, former Minister, Commerce and Industry. Thank you so much for the education to the ministers. I'm pretty sure that your lines are going to be buzzing for those who will seek some guidance in order for them to succeed. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's one down. Is more when we return from this break. Do stay with us.